touch with the State Patrol, and this is a response to an active shooter event. We want to kind of go through this, and then we can build on building our own active shooter policy more than just a generic policy. We can find our weak points, our strong points, and we can work on getting a plan together that will actually save lives in a situation. The more this goes on across the nation, the more people are learning from it. And I think if you don't keep up on it and you don't keep building your program around lessons learned, then it's kind of a travesty to our employees. So with that, I'm going to give you George Scott with the Nebraska State Patrol to put on their presentation.
Well, thanks for having me. Just a little background. I've been with State Patrol for about 27 years. I had a brief break in my service. My family pursued buying a marina at Harlan County, so otherwise I'd be ready to retire right now. So I have to do a little additional time. But through my career, I started out in traffic services station in the Grand Island area, and was there for approximately 12 years. During that time, I had the opportunity to work undercover in the drug division, as well as spent 5 or 6 years on our local SWAT team in that area. And a little over a year ago in July, I transferred from Troop C to Troop D here in the station in McCook. I followed my wife out here. Actually, she's managing a business in the McCook area, and they had a need for troopers in this area. In fact, they're short several troopers in this area. So it afforded me the opportunity to laterally transfer out to the area here, and I should have done it a long time ago. I had 25 years on the interstate, and I don't miss it one bit. I had a lot of fun when I worked out there, was actively involved in drug interdiction and criminal interdiction when I was out there. And there'll be another time for telling all those stories because we don't have enough time in the day. But I have enjoyed coming out to this area. Some of you, I don't recognize all the faces, may be familiar with an accent. I just need to drive a little faster and we'll get to know each other. In July of this year, I was involved in a car accident just here by your community, involving a truck, and pretty close call, but I appreciate, now just seeing the ambulance and the staff here. I appreciate all that, all the help that was out there very quickly on that day. Although I wasn't injured, I know the other driver was injured. So now I have the opportunity now to put on a program. It's called Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events. It's very common to call it active shooter events because primarily that's what we hear about on the news. But it could be anything. As we'll go through the program, we'll kind of show you different things, different modes that are taking place. And this is going to be very informal. If anybody has any questions at all when we're going through this or anything that they want to add, by all means raise your hand or just blurt out and we'll address it as we go. So with that, we'll get started. Should take an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we'll take a break. If or if you just need to get up and use the restroom, by all means do that. But we'll make you uncomfortable here. So, and if anybody didn't know, one of my aunts is sitting in the back room here. I haven't stopped her yet, but I know when she works, and I'm gonna get her one of these. Now her husband, on the other hand, probably more than likely stop him sometime. What's that?
It's an every week deal with him.
It could be, yeah. Anyway, we'll get started here. We start out with a little disclaimer. And mainly, this is put out there by our legal division. We just want people to be aware that this is a program. This isn't actual hands-on training. This is just kind of putting information out there. And as you alluded to, the training may come for you guys at a later date, and it's going to be tailored to what you guys want to do. But just so you know that this is a program and not actual hands-on training. So. What we're going to discuss is disaster response psychology, active killing events, civilian response, law enforcement response, and then we'll briefly touch on workplace violence and harassment. I know you guys are going to have policies in place, that will address specifically any kind of harassment. So I'm not here to rewrite any of your policies or anything like that, so. This is just a quick snapshot of the number of events that have taken place and the casualties involved. And if I'm in your way, just tell me to move, because I tend to move around a little bit. But, as you can kind of see, there's, 220. I need to focus this a little bit. Can you focus it?
Yeah.
Is it on the phone or how is it?
Yeah, on the
Yeah,
phone.
just got it. Tell me when you can see it on that. Of the 220 incidents, there's, in the casualties aren't just fatalities. That also includes those that are injured in the workplace. And you'll find when you get into this program that's put out by our training academy, there's going to be a lot of statistics and numbers. I'm not a big fan of statistics and numbers because when we're talking about statistics and numbers, we're actually talking about people and lives. And that's more important to me is to personalize it a little bit and not just throw out a bunch of numbers. But there are certain times when we do need to discuss the numbers. And you can kind of see this is, I think the time frame here is through 2016, 2000 through 2016 is what they were getting at here. And you can kind of see the trend is starting to go up. Anybody have any reason why the numbers are going up? No, there's no wrong answer. What is it, your perception? Why was the numbers going up?
Higher costs
For
with healthcare stuff, I just costs and bills.
for the number of incidents?
Oh, I was
Yep,
thinking,
no, the number of incidents are going up, and I'll hear all kinds of different responses. Some people say, well, it's video games, it's the ease of getting weapons, it's the ease or the sensationalization of the news media. It's always out there on the media, so now you have copycat incidents. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist to sit back and dissect all of those numbers. I mean, it could be a combination of all the above. So you just use your imagination. Why do people go out and do this? I don't know. Maybe there's a lot more stress in the workplace now than there was 20 years ago. There's just something to think about. There's a number of reasons why those numbers could be going up. This is the Columbine call. And if at any time people are uncomfortable with anything that's taking place with some of these videos, because it can be, by all means, you can excuse yourself until the videos. This is about a 2.5 to 3 minute. It's basically an audio recording of a 911 call within the Columbine shooting. And that's what really kind of started the discussion when it came to active killers and how we respond and as EMS and law enforcement versus civilians and what takes place in schools or workplaces. And this is just, it's hard to believe this has been over 20 years ago now. And this is, well, that actually took place in 2002, but coming up on 20 years. But it doesn't seem like it's been that long ago. But this is just something to kind of listen to. One of the teachers that was involved in this event, actually called in on 911 and the back and forth between the 911 operator. And we'll try to get the sound and stuff. Hopefully it's not too loud, but hopefully it's loud enough everyone can hear it.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I was a call by husband. So the station is done. He was sad. I believe I've been all my high school. I don't know what's my shoulder. But there was just a last day through it. Is anybody going to enter? Yes. Okay. I'm clear with the time.
Kind of difficult to understand.
yeah.
understand, even with a really good sound system, it's difficult to understand because it's, you're talking about older technology with the 911 system. What I think that they're trying to show here is some of the emotions and how, I mean, she was talking 100 miles an hour initially, and who wouldn't be? I mean, your adrenaline is really, at a high level at that point. But then she kind of calms down, and the dispatcher does a nice job of kind of calming her down and asking some good questions. I don't know how many of you people really remember when this all took place, what all these two individuals were doing or were planning on doing that day. I mean, they actually showed up with a couple of propane tank bombs that they had brought into the school, and then were set to detonate those two bombs in the cafeteria area of the school. I believe it was the cafeteria area of the school. And then they left, and then they actually started shooting people outside, and then entered the building and shot. I think they killed, I want to say, 13 people and wounded 20. And that, I mean, at the time, I mean, that just seems like just a huge number of people. And now look what's happening. I mean, we're killing 50 some people in Las Vegas, and there's it's body counts, for shock factors is what, and these two were on a suicide pact as well. They both killed themselves at the end of this whole thing. And I want to be, to minimize that, but I'm a little more cold and callous. I don't say boo-hoo, off yourselves. When it comes to that kind of stuff, I just save the taxpayers the dollars of having to prosecute you. It's sad and cold for me to say, but I can say it, I guess. Any questions when it came to the Columbine, or anything that you may have thought were questionable about what you heard on the audio? So,
Main thing that stuck out to me is your dispatchers are trained to stay calm in those situations, and the teacher wasn't. But you noticed how much easier it was to understand the dispatcher than the teacher. That's why we train, and we want to get to that point ourselves, because they can't understand you, they can't help you.
right. And different people are going to react differently. I've been around dispatchers for my entire career, and unfortunately, it's a position within our agency that isn't paid enough, and there's a turnover rate. So you have some that are excellent, they've been there for a long time, some that haven't been there a long time, and you don't know what you're going to get in those situations. You like to think, we have multiple dispatchers in our department, where they can kind of help each other out in those instances. But you're absolutely right. There is a level of training that they do receive that helps calm people down, and that, whether it's a 911 operator or for us, they're dispatching us troops. They can calm us. We get amped up too, so they calm us down too. So it's kind of nice to have someone that has that expertise and can do that. One of the things I like listening to is, how she kind of took control of her classroom, so to speak, because we don't know how we would react in those situations. I'd like to think that somebody would, in an authority position such as a teacher or a principal or superintendent in a school situation, would be able to direct people that, barricade the door, lock yourself in a closet, whatever the case is. It's nice to have that calming presence, or somebody that handles the pressure well. So now we go to like this disaster response, the background science of how people behave in high stress situations or events. 3 stages of disaster response. You have denial, deliberation, and decisive movements. And you can kind of see that, if initially you can't believe what's happening or what you're hearing or what you're seeing, we have that, it's not going to happen here. And I'd like to think that none of us have gone through anything like this before. If you have, raise your hand. I want to talk to you afterwards and get, find out what it's like, because I haven't gone through anything like this. So you're going to have that level of denial just simply because it can't happen here, or I've never been through that before. So your mind plays a little, some tricks on you sometimes. And then when we'll get in, we'll talk about all of these. And your deliberation is, I'm a big believer in mental rehearsal. I play the what if game while I'm driving down the road. I put hundreds of miles on a day. I like to play that game, like, what would I do if this happened? What would I do, in this scenario? Those kind of things. And it doesn't cost any money for that kind of training, and it's just spend a minute or two every day, just kind of preparing yourself. You don't have to go through the motions. When it comes to training, it's always good to go through training as a group when it comes to your movements and evacuating a place or whatever the case is, but you don't have to do that. You spend a little bit of time just thinking about it. That's half the battle right there, is getting your mind working that way. And then when it comes down to it, your decisive moments, putting your plans into action. And the normalcy bias is putting your head in the sand. It's not going to happen in Winkleman. It's not going to happen at Stratton. It's not going to happen at this school or that school. It's easy to get into that mentality because you hear some of these events. It happens in Las Vegas. It happens in big cities. It's not going to happen here. Well, it does happen. It can. I mean, the potential is always there because there could be just an individual in the community that's what we used to think. Back in the day, the small communities are always going to be your safest, and statistically, that's absolutely the truth. The odds are it's not going to happen here, but hey, lightning can strike. So you have your denial phase. People don't want to accept the mentality or the reality that the situation is going on around them. People are experiencing things for the first time. We talked about this. When was the last time you heard firecrackers in a school or in a hospital? Probably never. So if it sounds like firecrackers, it's probably not firecrackers. There was just recently a shooting, and actually a couple of instances in hospitals. One at University of Kansas, this past week, and then I think it was Mercy Hospital in Chicago. And there was a situation to where you had a scorned lover go in and decide to confront his wife that broke off, or not his wife, his fiance or girlfriend that broke off an engagement, and a police officer that responded was shot and killed, as well as his fiance, and then another coworker of hers was shot and killed before he killed himself. So it could happen. There's a lot of dynamics that can come into place. It could happen. I mean, University of Kansas isn't that far away.
Didn't Mercy in Omaha have somebody with a knife?
Yeah, there's been several of those instances. I know, I was probably over 10 years ago, there was a man shot and killed that had a knife in the emergency room in Cumberland. And, this happened to be a local police officer stopped in. It was a holiday, I believe. Stopped in for coffee. And he just happened to be there when the guy showed up. Otherwise, that could have been really bad. Because of the response it would have taken, he could have really done a lot of damage and hurt a lot of people. So we'll talk a little bit about this. The training academy is trying to get into the psychology a little bit of the human brain versus the lizard brain. I think what he's getting at here is when we're talking about, the human brain tends to deliberate a little bit more than, say, an animal or a lizard. A lizard's very, they have, their options are very limited. It's going to be fight, flight, or hide. And we're going to respond sometimes that same way. When it comes down to a stressful situation, and that's okay. I mean, those are some things that you don't have to think a lot about. Okay, I'm going to either get myself out of the situation, I'm going to fight my way out of the situation, or I'm going to stay put and I'm going to hide someplace. And those are definitely options. The nice thing that we have going for us is that we can mentally rehearse and deliberate and formulate a plan if you have the time to do it. So I think that's what they're getting at when they put these slides out. Fight, flight, or freeze. That's really the only options a lot of your animals are going to have. Any deer hunters in here? And there's probably quite a few. Probably all of you, right? Yeah. You just hunt them with your car, or you hunt them with your gun. I mean that really isn't that the truth with in the animal kingdom. Those are the options that they're going to take. We can take the same options. I mean, absolutely, when we're confronted with the situation, we can take those same options. But when we're talking about deliberation, you have the opportunity to try, to deliberate and calm yourself. We'll talk a little bit about combat breathing. We always call it tactical breathing. I did it a lot, or I learned a lot about it when I was on the SWAT team years ago. It's when you're going into a situation, getting ready to breach a door and going after a bad guy, you're amped up, your heart rate is really high, and that's not bad. You operate better at a higher beats per minute or a higher heart rate than you do at just super calm or super high. When you're super high, your tunnel vision's going to come into place. So they taught us to how to, they call it tactical breathing. It's just simply breathe in for 3 or 4 seconds, hold for 3 or 4 seconds, and then breathe out for 3 or 4 seconds. When you do a series of this, and you can try it sometime, when you're getting kind of excited, just breathe in, hold, breathe out slow. And then what it does is it starts bringing your heart rate down, and it starts, you start eliminating that tunnel vision and going more to, to being able to see a little bit more what's going on, and it calms you down and helps you think a little bit better. So try to shift your emotion. Obviously, it's a lot easier to put it down in a program than it is in real life. I can't even imagine what it would be like, if you were sitting at your desk one minute and then shots are ringing out the next. A lot of times, if it's going to occur for me, I'm either getting called to the event, so I'm already preparing in my mind, what I'm up against, or I've made enough traffic stops over the years to realize, okay, I can't let my guard down. So that's why we try to, we want to get out to the civilian population and be able to tell people, if you can at all, try to shift your emotions. And that's where some of your mental rehearsal comes into play. I've thought about this. What would I do if this happened? And again, I'm not saying this is going to be easy to do. It's not, and it might be impossible to do for some people. Especially if you're just tend to be an emotional person anyway. Script or practice when you get into deliberation. Some of your script, what they're getting at here is if you have a plan in place, and if you get into like schools do tornado drills and fire drills, and now they're getting into active killer drills in a lot of school systems. I don't know if they do here. I know it's coming. And there are policies in place, and this is what we do in a lockdown or lockout situation, or shelter-in-place situation, those kind of things. There are those that are scripted, and then you go through and practice those. And it's difficult to do because you probably have multiple shifts coming in at different times of day, and here we are today. This is kind of a bit of a practice, being able to get you to think about it a little bit. We still practice a lot. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I've got to go to in-service training, and part of our in-service training involves active killer, where we'll actually go into buildings and we'll clear buildings and go to threats and things like that. So as much as we have to practice, I'm not asking you to practice as much as we do, but it's still something you have to consider, is putting those plans sometimes into motion before the actual event happens. Again, this is a bit kind of redundant. I think they just want to drive it home. You have the freeze, flight, or fight plan, and those are options that are available to you. Anybody know who Rick Rescorla is? I have very few people ever know who this is. When the airplanes flew into the Twin Towers, Rick Rescorla was he was a safety. He was a safety officer for, I believe it was Stanley Morgan, one of the banks or one of the large companies that was in the investment firms that was in the tower, one of the first towers that went down. And he was thought of at the time to be kind of a general pain in the butt to a lot of the folks there, because he had the mindset that it's not a matter of if it happens, it's when it happens. They knew that the World Trade Centers were targets, and they had been in the past. And then he implemented plans and made the people that he was responsible for, 27 or 2,800 people that he was responsible for in this particular company, go through the motions and actually practice evacuating and practice drills, and would give them training, just information to know. Well, he's credited for saving over 2,700 people that day, because he was the one on the bullhorn, giving these people directions on, come this way, keep coming out of the building, keep coming out of the building. He had a fairly good sized wave of people out of the building, and he went back in because he knew he knew he still had 13 people inside the building. So that for whatever reason, they decided to stay put, and the rest came out. So he was credited for saving 2,700 people that day, but he went back in to try to get the remaining 1,300. He died that day, but, so I'm not trying to pick anybody out here, but somebody be Rick Rescorla. I mean, somebody, just insist and hey, I know this sucks, this is a pain in the butt, but, we need to practice every now and then, whether it's once a year or every 6 months, whatever the case is, let's practice. And maybe you guys do, I don't know. I know schools are better about it. Periodically, evacuating a building or practicing a lockdown situation. So I think that's why they wanted to include this, because they want to show the importance of actually going through with some of your training and practice. All right. Active killer events. What an active killer event is, or a person is a suspect who's actively or immediately causing death or serious bodily injury. The activity is not contained, and therefore immediate risk of death and serious injury is going to happen to potential victims. We've changed from active shooter. We used to be, our training was always active shooter training, because we'd be listening for where the gunfire is, because that's the majority of what we hear about is what's actually taking place. But we've gone to active killers because somebody could be in there with a samurai sword. Somebody could be, you name it. I mean, use your imagination. They could be using whatever they could, an axe or something along those lines. There's no set profile, mindset, and some will broadcast what they're going to do ahead of time, whether it's on social media or they may tell someone. They may leave a note or a manifesto of some sort. Most of those are found after the fact. Sometimes they're found ahead of time. I mean, there's been a lot of instances where some of these events have been actually foiled or interrupted because somebody spoke up or found out about it before the event actually took place. What are some profiles that you think of? I mean, there's no wrong answer here when you think of an active killer.
People who are bullied, depression,
Yeah.
outcasts.
Yeah. How about someone that sympathizes with ISIS? Yeah, you hear about that too. I mean, that's definitely an option. Somebody that's recently fired, it's definitely an option. Use your imagination. Like we talked about the Mercy hospital killing. There's a scorned lover. And he knew that was the end for him, and he decided to take some people with him. Those are definitely things. So it's if you start narrowing yourself, we always talked about this when we did criminal interdiction on the interstate. If you start narrowing your thought to just stopping Colorado plated vehicles with deadhead stickers on the back of them, you're going to get a lot of dope. Let me tell you that. but you start. I could tell you stories, about grandma and grandpa in an RV that are carrying 1,000 pounds of dope down the interstate. It's black, white, Hispanic, you name it. It's everybody has the potential to be an active killer or dope hauler.
So you don't know of any, have they done any data or research on the people that have done just healthcare facilities? Even long-term care facilities? Is there data out there?
There probably is. They haven't included it with our program. I'm sure FBI, they're great at gathering data, so I'm sure But they're generally a couple of years, you know, it gives them a chance to really digest it, but I'm sure that I mean, I don't know if they'll come out and just, if there's anything just glaring, because I'm not aware of anything that's glaring that this particular set or this group is going to commit that particular crime or event more so than others. I don't know. I think generally you're seeing a lot more males than females. I think that's just, you know, generally, but that's not to say that the potential isn't there. You know, like I said before, don't limit yourself. You start getting into, you know, thinking that it's only going to be males, you know, and then you know, your first line of defense is your receptionist at the front desk, and she just starts scrutinizing males, and then the next thing you know, a female walks in with an AR or a handgun and a backpack. You know, those are, for whatever reason, there's a lot of mental illness out there that doesn't discriminate between, you know, men and women. So I mean, there's some things to consider about. But you know, I skirted around your answer because I don't know. But I'm sure that you could probably do some research through maybe some FBI.
Because I could see how that would be helpful, even though you don't want to get tunnel vision, I could see how that would help our planning at the hospital if the majority of them are disgruntled employees that had just been let go.
Yeah.
I mean, it would maybe help us with our planning a little bit.
I would say that if you have recently let someone go, and a week or so later or a couple of days later they come back, yeah, I would be keyed up a little bit. But you know, it could be different. What could occur here maybe a little bit different than what could occur in Chicago or New York City. I can't remember all the details on the recent one that happened in Kansas. It seemed to me like there was a rolling dispute that had taken place, and one of the victims was coming to the hospital, and the other guy followed him in to try to finish him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard one to predict, you know, especially when you're getting into a domestic or a gang-related, you know, situation. I'm not saying that domestic could easily happen here and could roll into an emergency room or into a hospital situation. So, yeah, I would definitely, you know, maybe follow up, maybe check some of the FBI websites out. I mean, there's tons of information out there. We talk a little bit about this modality of active killer. Primarily, we're hearing about the firearms or sometimes knives. But hey, let's talk about these. You know, we can talk about the bicycle. I believe it was a Hudson Bay hike and bike trail. You know, the guy on the far left drove his vehicle in, killed I think 8 or 9 people, injured, you know, dozens more. Paris, you know, fire. I'm shocked that's not used more. You've been to some of the high rises in not particularly this area, but you start getting into maybe Omaha and then some of the large metropolitan areas where fire could definitely be used, you know, to kill lots of people. IEDs, Oklahoma City, you all remember that. Some of you may not be old enough to remember, but I definitely am. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, talk to you, Courtney.
Little bit of fertilizer and you know, diesel fuel and you know, Boston Marathon. You know, these guys made you know, just really primitive little, you know, bombs and killed people. And this is maybe kind of hard to see. Different locations. I mean, we can go anywhere from educational facilities to commercial. For you folks, luckily, one of the smallest pieces of that pie are healthcare facilities or places of worship. That's not to say it can't happen. You know, we recently, it has. Residences, open space. You know, that number when this was put out was prior to the Las Vegas. I mean, that was just a huge area. I mean, it was 15 acres, that outdoor venue for that country music concert. Why do you think the commercial is such a large a large piece, almost half.
A lot of them, like around here, are chemicals.
Well, yeah, the availability of chemicals is definitely can factor into it. I think you're looking at a lot of potential disgruntled employees that have recently been fired, conflicts with coworkers or bosses. Also, everybody has a place they go to work, I mean, when it comes down to it, so there's a lot of factory type settings, and as cruel as this is, what else could factor into that? Usually a large commercial environment, body count. You hate to say it, but it's the truth. They get more bang for their buck, so to speak. I'm gonna take a lot of people with me. I am so irritated. I know I'm not gonna survive this. I'm gonna take a bunch of people with me. That's one of the reasons that your commercial settings are targeted a lot, and somewhat of a lapse of security in these. People are coming and going in these places a lot, just for the ease of doing business. So that's part of the reason you see that. Don't get into thinking that it can't happen here. How many people were? Student actually kind of pushed him and fought back, and part of the reason that this did not result in and maybe some of you remember, some of you don't, is this particular guy was just under a lot of stress, had some mental problems, under a lot of stress. It was approaching a time for tests or major exams were coming up. But he showed up on UNL campus with a rifle with 30 rounds in a magazine, and he was ready to go. His gun malfunctioned. Otherwise, who knows how that was. And another student, sees the opportunity when his gun malfunctioned to push him, and then the guy took off and was later arrested without any incident. But it could have been a lot worse than it was. But this, I think, a few of these slides that we'll get into is just kind of get you into the mentality that it can happen right here in Nebraska. Shadron Junior High. In 1995, 13-year-old had some problems, had a beef with one of his teachers or a coach, and luckily he was just superficially wounded. I think he had grazed off of his chest or something like that. But it could have been a lot worse. He could have killed that teacher and killed other students. This is a little more recent, 2002, the bank robbery in Norfolk. 5 people killed, 1 injured, and those folks were later arrested, fleeing the area. I think they were caught up around O'Neill in that area. And had they not been caught, I don't know. The mentality of these particular individuals, there's no doubt in my mind there would have probably been other people killed. I think they would have done another bank robbery, and I think they would have had more fatalities. Westroads Mall. Some of you remember this Van Mar shooting. 8 people killed, 4 wounded. This happened. I think this individual's father or stepfather was a law enforcement officer. Lots of mental issues there, and lots of documented mental issues, and unfortunately, that has come up quite a bit. Millard South, a little more recently, Millard South High School. This was a 17-year-old student that was recently sent home or expelled from school for vandalizing school property. I think he had driven a vehicle across one of the athletic fields and tore it up. Didn't like the fact that he was kicked out of school and came back and took it out on the assistant principal. I think the assistant principal was killed, and the principal was wounded in that he committed suicide. He left a suicide note. He had pre-planned this and knew that he was going to end it all that day. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Is the target availability? That's what we saw in Las Vegas, and in that particular outdoor venue. When you start talking about commercial buildings and things like that, at any given time, you probably have 50 or more people in the hospital, don't you? I mean, between staff and well, I can't say patients and things like that. You have the potential for a lot of people there. I mean, at any given time, are there more people in that particular facility in the Benkelman area than any place else in town, other than the school? Let's take the school out. But, I mean, potential for a lot of people to be able to do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time. And then at the bottom there is how quickly police arrive. I can tell you right now, in my area, it's 5,000 square miles, and many times I'm the only one working it. In February, I'll increase that by another 3,000 square miles. So I can be down in Napanee, Nebraska, and something could happen in Benkelman, and I'll have to probably stop and get gas on the way. I'll be a couple hours away. That's just me. Now, luckily, you have a sheriff's office here, but they're short-staffed. They have to, be afforded days off, and their work periods as well. So there are times, that's why we want to put these programs out there. There's times you guys are the first line of defense. And I shouldn't say times, you are the first line of defense until we get there. In an ideal situation, if something would happen and you would have a deputy sitting down here at the sheriff's office, it's going to take him 2 to 3 minutes probably to respond to your facility. And he will be by himself probably. So, those are just some things you have to really think about. I put a program on for the folks up at the college up in Curtis, and I said, let's just flip it around. I could be in Benkelman if I'm not dodging semis, and have to run all the way back up to Curtis. We'll get there as soon as we can, but the reality is we're shorthanded. A lot of the departments are shorthanded, and when it comes down to budgets, Dundy County is not going to be able to afford to have a force of 50 deputies working here. It's just not going to. It's not feasible. It's not going to happen. So this is where I get on my soapbox and use this as a recruiting opportunity, because we are so short-handed. We are constantly looking for new troopers. So if you know anybody that really wants to come to work for the state patrol,
Can you remember in like the last 5 years, has the state patrol been called to assist anybody, sheriff's office, local police department, at any healthcare facilities for individuals who have come in with complaints that became violent or whatever?
I'm sure we have.
Kicked out or?
There was, just a few years ago, there was a trooper involved with the subject in the hospital in New York, and the subject was shot. That was probably within the last 5 years. In this particular area, I haven't heard of anything, where there has been an active killer event, but I know that we have responded to instances where there have been domestics or someone that's either been on drugs, really drunk and causing problems, to where their security staff, was basically overwhelmed by the situation, and we would get called in to back up other agencies. The first call is going to go to the local police department. If they're either shorthanded or overwhelmed, or if we're close by, we'll get called too. But total number, I don't know. It does happen. And I wouldn't say frequently, but it happens. I would say at least once a month, if not more than that.
Are you seeing your local hospitals, the little ones and stuff, increasing their security by putting,
I'm not seeing it a lot. I wouldn't say that I'm seeing an increased number. It's going to be up to the individual hospitals. They're going to have, they operate on budgets too, and unfortunately, sometimes some of the first things that get cut on budgets are, people when it comes to security. I mean, it's the plain truth. I mean, I get it to an extent, and some of it goes back to some of the mindset, it's not going to happen in Benkelman, it's not going to happen here, it's not going to happen, name a small town, because it hasn't in the past. Why should we waste money and spend money to do that? I'm not trying to tell you, put it in your budget, because, budgets are a hard thing to work out sometimes, so. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer that, because I don't know. you know, the local smaller hospitals well enough to know where they've come from and where they're at now when it comes to addressing security. You're starting to see more facilities that will have a kind of a line of, I don't want to call it defense, but a line of security when it comes to buzzing people into places or having parts of their hallways secured a little bit more, to where now they're not necessarily devoting a security officer. They're securing within by putting up barriers that are harder to get past. Does that make sense? I've definitely seen that increase. Coming from the Kearney area prior to here, you just don't get around that hospital very easily, without a purpose. You can find your way around some of these so-called firewalls, but it's not easy to do. So hopefully that answers that a little bit.
With the increase in the opioid crisis and stuff, the rural communities that supply them, the hospital, our small clinics and stuff, persons will eventually target those if, it's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you?
I haven't noticed it yet, but the potential's there. I mean, and I don't see us getting a handle on the opioid crisis anytime soon. That's going to take a while, if we ever do. So that potential's there. And you guys can tell me better, than I know, what the effects are of someone that is strung out on opioids and need to get that fix quickly. That's where you people are the pros when it comes to that. I just know from a reactive standpoint that they'll steal from their mother, to feed that habit. And so your residual crime or your snowball effect of the crime that takes place, your thefts and things like that increase when they're trying to feed that habit. But when somebody is strung out and they're in a bad way, yeah, they'll get into your facilities and do harm to get that. So I haven't seen it yet, but I'm not saying it's not going to happen because I think it is.
Well, and as in a healthcare facility, because people can move around so much in our hospital, if our spidey senses go off, we have to trust them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've pulled a machete out of someone's back, not here, at my old job, but
You're absolutely
who
right.
knows what he would have done with that.
I would rather err
It was
on that
not
side
well.
and be able to explain away, why I did something that, rather than kick myself or live with the fact that I didn't follow up on the hair raised on the back of my neck. We need to get past offending people. Are you going to offend some people? Yes, but if I get called into my administrator's office and I am prepared to explain why I did what I did. You just can't get into now that, being afraid to step on toes. Sometimes you have to. I'm not gonna make you sit here for 3 minutes. I'm just gonna cut it in time, but you just think about this. Sometime when you have the time, just think about, on an ideal situation, 3 minutes is going to elapse. More than likely, it's gonna be much more than that before law enforcement or someone can get there to help you. That's why, you just think about, if I were just to fire off a round every second, which is pretty easy to do. Any hunters in here, you can fire off a handgun or any kind of gun. 1 round a second is easy. So you think about how many rounds could be shot in 3 minutes, or how many people could be killed in 3 minutes time. It can happen very quickly, and the death toll can definitely just increase in a very short amount of time. Because you have to realize, the bad guys are thinking the same thing. They sometimes will do dry runs. They will sometimes call in, fake complaints and to test what local law enforcement's response time is to something. They follow us. Hey, the local kids in McCook, they know exactly where all the troopers live in town. Don't think they don't drive by our house to see if we're off duty. They've got it. They have it figured out when we're working days, when we're when the night shift starts, things like that. They know when to go out and raise hell out in the county. Hey, I did it when I was a kid. I knew where the local cops were working, when they were eating. speeding, all that kind of stuff. It's just, you know, that's what people do. Bad guys do the same thing. They know how long, you know, bank robbers are infamous for this. I mean, they will sit out and they will know where a deputy is at any given time, or a trooper, or wherever the case, you know, may be, and they know what the response time is. So they're gonna hit places that they, you know, they can get a high body count in a short amount of time, and possibly get out if, you know, if they're bent on doing a lot of damage and then leaving the scene. Most of them are killing themselves, or as soon as they're gonna get as many people killed as they can, and then when law enforcement shows up, then they'll, you know, stick a gun in their mouth. But they just wanna kind of just show, you know, just get you thinking about how long 3 minutes can be. It really can be a long time. Now we'll get into some of the civilian response, and that's primarily what the training or what the program is about. We'll get into a little bit of what law enforcement and EMS's response are. You guys know what EMS's response is. So just don't, what we get at, don't deny what you just heard. It's easy to just think, oh, who's shooting firecrackers on? Well, like we talked about way at the beginning, how many times have people shot on firecrackers in your hospital? Probably never. If they did, they need to be fired. If they're you know, one of the employees, especially, there's a time and place for practical jokes, and the workplace is no longer a place for those kind of jokes. Immediately in a situation like that, you better start going into deliberation, whether it's fight, flight, or hide. Those are the options that are available to you. I don't know what your policy is when you do hear something like that. If you immediately go into a lockdown or, you know, those kind of situations, but you need to have a plan in place that somebody is immediately on the phone with the dispatcher someplace getting people coming your way. So that should definitely be priority one is, you know, getting someone coming, whether you have somebody with a, you know, everybody's gonna have a cell phone, but somebody's getting on the phone because you know, those kind of things will come in. But the days of denying what you know, see, hear, smell, those things, those times they're over. Like we talked about earlier, I would rather laugh about something after the fact that scared the heck out of me. It was just somebody dropped a book or something in a hallway that sounded like a gunshot, and you know, I would rather start thinking, oh, you know, so that didn't sound good. You know, time for me to, didn't sound right. You know, trust your instincts when it comes to those kind of things. The next one, hopefully the audio will be a little bit better on this one because it's not like a 911 call. But the next slide. We'll play this and then we'll take a break. This is only just a few minutes. You all will probably remember the Virginia Tech shooting. At the time, that was the deadliest school-related attack of its time. And this is going to be one of the survivors of that event that's going to just talk a little bit about some of the things she heard and saw and what they had done. Can't make this any louder. sorry, it was kind of hard to hear, but, you know, she just went through, you know, kind of what had taken place, you know, how quick, he had left the room to go to other rooms for other vehicles. I mean, it was several classrooms in this particular wing, and then he came back to finish what he started. You know, he had time. What a lot of people don't remember about this particular guy, he had a lot of mental issues as well. But he got inside of the building and chained the door shut and locked them from the inside. So he knew, he had done his research that it was going to be hard for somebody to respond. He locked and chained the doors from the inside so no one could get in to help these people. He was planning on killing everyone there. Lots and lots of rounds, but he did all his damage with handguns. He had several handguns. Walked in with a duffel bag but did his damage. But we'll get into another slide, and again, we'll take a little break, but we'll get into some of the statistics of what took place, because we're going to get into talking after the break about denying someone entry, hiding, things like that, options that are available to you. And then you'll see, we'll tie it into this particular shooter, what he was able to do when people did nothing, and what he was able to do when people denied him entry into a room and stuff like that. So let's take 5 or 10. Because whenever you guys come back, we'll get started. So. When the gal from the Virginia Tech shooting, when she was talking about playing dead, did you catch that, why she did that? Because she was trying to tell herself to don't let him see breathe, because she knew what he was doing. He was coming back in, and they were still alive. He was following them up. So that's an option. I mean you're only limited by your imagination on what options that you can potentially take in this kind of situation. So we'll get into that, and there's several different things we'll talk about here when it comes to the deliberation part of this. You can avoid or run, deny, hide, or defend or fight. And when we're talking about avoid or run, it's to get out, get away from the situation, leave the building if you can, if you're able to. Deny or hide. Can't get away, secure the room from the killer. Look for secondary exits. You plan to prepare to defend yourself if you have to. Or get into the defend fight. That means the person or the killer has made it into the room and there's no other viable option. Use whatever means necessary to defend yourself. You're in a situation now is I am going to be killed and I'm not going down without fighting. I don't know what it is. If you want to throw a chair at somebody, or if whatever the case is, fight with your bare hands, or if you have any means to do it. You are faced at that point with the reality that I am going to be killed. And I'm not a mother. I can only imagine what you would do, as a mother to save your child. You would fight until you died. You had nothing left. You have to do that sometimes for yourself, or for somebody that's not able to. So those are. You hate to have to put that mentality into your thinking or into your toolbox, but it's really something that you have to think about when it comes to these situations. That's when I got into the mental rehearsal part of it. You have to sometimes ask yourself. I'm not asking for you to all be warriors or law enforcement or in the military. You don't have to have that background, but you have to do something. I mean, you can either cower and take it, or you can fight, to your last breath. So those are some things to think about. This will talk a little bit about situational awareness, and I'm hoping that this is a school board meeting, is what this is.
This would be the first step in that whole process. Everybody in this room.
dissect that one all day long. Couple of things, or several things that took place. He, just to put everybody at ease, he missed everybody he shot at. From me to you, he missed everybody he shot at. By the grace of God, I guess. And we'll talk about that. She did something. And when it comes down to it, I mean, she did what she felt, you know, she needed to do. She took her purse and she tried to knock the gun out of the guy's hand. That would have been an opportunity for the guy sitting, you know, right next to him to, you know, jump in and help her. You know, he had a window, a very narrow window of opportunity to help her out. But I have to give her a lot of credit. I mean, when you make that decision to try to disarm someone, that is a, you know, all or nothing situation, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I got to give her credit for trying something. Another thing, you know, that you notice in this, you know, what did he do right off the bat? You didn't see it right away, but then you noticed it. He did the, you know, the big spray paint on the wall, the anarchy symbol on the wall. That isn't, you know, that's a huge red flag right off the bat. Not necessarily that symbol, but somebody that does something out of the ordinary like that. You know, he said, "I'm going to die today." You know, so he was going to take people with him, and he felt that his wife was wrongly terminated from employment from the school district. But another thing, I don't know many people that would decide to now get into a political debate with a guy, you know, pointing a gun right at your face. He decided it was his opportunity to, you know, to make some political points about, you know, whether or not he campaigned on property taxes versus sales tax. I don't know anybody that would do that, but apparently that guy felt that was a good opportunity for him to score some points with the guy. But you know, he.
Just a
Wanted to keep him talking.
And there may have been some of that going on. I think that there was a level of that going on, and I think, to tell you the truth, I think that's probably what he was doing. But you run the risk of now amping him up a little bit more. And you know, so that's all, you know.
Is this the video where, I've watched it before, the resource officer wasn't allowed to have his weapon on him?
Right.
And he had to go out to his vehicle and get it and come back, so
Yeah.
that could have
You
been
heard
why
him
he
talk.
kept talking, making him talk, was till
Yeah.
he knew that guy could get
And I
back.
think that that's exactly what took place. But you can see, you know, when he kind of, you probably don't have a gun on you anyway. You know, he knew that the resource officer wasn't going to do anything to him. You know, you'll find that a lot of these situations take place in venues where guns are not allowed. Why else? You know, if they're going to immediately meet resistance, they're typically not. They're going to shy away from places like that. You know, so that's just something to kind of, you know.
So did somebody on the panel end up shooting him, or did somebody come
The
back?
resource
from
officer
behind?
came back.
Okay.
He had to go get his gun
And
out of
so
city
you'll
hall.
kind of see, we'll revisit this video a time or two. But your situational awareness, you know, when it comes to this, you know, if you're sitting out in the seats out in front of the school board meeting there, and you see somebody stand up and interrupt the meeting and spray paint something on the wall, if you have an opportunity and you're inclined to use that flight, get your ass out of there. I mean, when it comes down to it, get out of the situation, get yourself away from the situation, get on the phone and start letting someone know. He gave people that opportunity, or people were given that opportunity right off the bat, so.
You could tell they didn't know what to do. There was some on one side of the room that cowered under the chairs, and then the lady closest to the camera got up and left.
Yeah, someone got under, you know, you saw some people get under their desks and things like that.
So is there any idea, did the lady on the far end,
That hit him with the purse?
no, the one that was setting, she had ample opportunity to leave that room when he had his head turned many times.
And I can't sit back and say what people will, that's why it's really kind of interesting to see the psychology. not everybody is going to choose to run. Some people are going to be kind of paralyzed with fear a little bit and kind of don't, can't decide what they want to do. Some people are going to hide under a desk. Some people, you saw some people get down between the seats, things like that. It's interesting. I until you're in that situation, you really don't know what you're going to do. When we talked a little bit about this, avoid and run. There was, when you saw the JDLR just doesn't look right. When a guy stands up in a meeting and starts painting something on the, defacing the property and putting something on the wall, the anarchy system, leave. Know where your exits are, call 911. We talked a little bit about that. Consider your secondary exits. I don't know, and again, you guys know your facilities better than I do. You know what, if you can throw a chair through a window and break a window out. There are a lot of school systems now that have very thick tempered glass, and that's not even an option. They look at it from a security or safety point to keep people from breaking in as well, which doesn't afford someone the opportunity to sometimes break out or get out of situations. They're doing better with some of your school systems to be able to have windows that are large enough that they can lock and or they'll swing out to the point where now they can start letting kids get out, especially at ground level. Those are some things to consider with your facilities and stuff like that. So, and obviously, if it's not available to you to get out of your exits, and you also have to consider avoiding by hiding, going into a bathroom or locking the doors, things like that. Get out of sight, close the doors, shut the lights off, things like that. People, if you have a situation like the Sandy Hook shooting, they found that some of the classrooms actually had doors that had windows, and they had artwork on some of the windows. He actually walked past these thinking that, okay, there's no one in that room. So they're going to go to the easiest, most visible targets initially, and then they may do a secondary sweep to try and follow up if a killer is so inclined to do that. So lock the door, lights out of sight. If you can, you get into a position to where you can deny access or hide. If you're going to get into a barricade the door situation, the heavier the stuff, whether it's desks or file cabinets, you guys know how heavy file cabinets are. You might need help moving some of them, but if you can get several file cabinets in front of a door, that's gonna keep someone from getting into your office or into your room. Door stops. There are a lot of aftermarket things that are coming out because with all these tragedies, there are going to be those entrepreneurs and those people that are now thinking outside the box of how do I secure as cheaply as I can a room that I couldn't secure before. You're seeing things like chains. They will put a simple just a flip down door stops will help. Some of the wedges, ropes, things like that they can put in place quickly. Sometimes some people are adding some kind of deadbolt situations, or those are some things to think about when if you're into working on the facilities and securing doors. And I'm sure you guys are pretty decent shape up there, but it's something to think about, when it comes to securing especially from the inside of a room when you're trying to deny someone access to it. This is something we just talked about. Tactical cinches, door stops, ropes. You can do that if you're strong enough. If you're sitting there trying to fight over a doorway for a long time, you might have to have multiple people holding a strap or a door. Typically, unless you're the only people left in the building in one room, they're not going to sit there and fight. They're going to move on to something that's easier. So if you can deny them access, even for a brief amount of time, that will help. Now, if they've gotten into the room, they've been able to get through the door. Again, we talked a little bit about the lady with the purse trying to knock the gun out of someone's hand. You really have to be committed to doing this, but if someone now makes access into your room, and it may be multiple people. You're gonna have to try and get, if you're getting into a fight situation, if you're going to cower, and you're gonna probably take a bullet. If you now get into a position and where you can really control the muzzle of that gun, especially of a long rifle, typically when they'll enter a room, the muzzle or the barrel will come into the room first. If you're in a position out of sight, you may be able to control that barrel. If you can control that barrel, you can control where that round is going. But you can't give up. If you've made the commitment to do that, you never give up. And those are situations to where you need to have a buddy or somebody. If you're in the room with multiple people, now it's time to everybody just go to town on this guy and not let him have that control of that gun anymore. So again, think about what we talked about earlier. At minimum, probably 3 minutes before we're there. So there's going to be times where you may have to fight for 3 minutes, until someone's there, or it could be longer. So that's just something that you kind of consider, mentally rehearse, throw a chair at them, things like that, distract them so somebody can, maybe go wrestle a weapon away from them. This is some kind of hard to decipher what they're getting at with this graph. I'll try and sum it up a little bit. You can kind of see what they're getting at is when the Virginia Tech shooter or killer got into the rooms, those that did nothing. They just sat at their desk and didn't deny or shut off the lights or hide or anything like that. It was a very high percentage of them were killed or wounded. Those that had a limited amount, they may have put a chair or something in front of the door, or they made an attempt to deny him access. The number started coming down. And to one of the rooms on the far right, they flat out put enough barricade in front of that door that he could not access, and you could see no one was shot, no one was killed. So statistically, when it comes to those situations, if you do nothing, when somebody is hell-bent on killing you, and you do nothing to stop them, they're going to kill you. If you do anything at all, it increases your chance of survival. Even if it's just a little bit, it increases your chances. So, it's just something to think about. If you're going to fight for your life, it can only help you. If you refuse and you give up and don't fight for your life, the chances are very, very good that you're going to lose your life. So, it's sobering, but it's true. All right, hopefully the sound comes in, because this is actually a very good video put on. It was a sheriff's office in California, and it's not real life, so it's I shouldn't say anything about you guys if you're queasy about blood, because y'all come from a hospital. And the funny fact is, I don't mind seeing blood unless it's my own, I'll pass out. But anyway, there are some reenactments in this particular video that have some blood and stuff in it. So if it does bother you, I'm not offended if you choose just to listen and not watch. But they did a nice job talking about different scenarios that could potentially come up, and some of the response that you may see by law enforcement, what some of the people have done. It really, I could have probably shown this video and then just went home. You guys probably get it.
And like any other church tragedy today, when an employee opened fire on a supervisor and fellow coworkers. Students, parents, teachers are asking why today after a bloody rampage plunged this campus into tragedy.
Details are just coming in, but we're being told that a heavily armed gunman opened fire this evening at the mall food court behind me. There's no official word on any casualties yet, but one eyewitness reported seeing at least 6 people shot.
Active shooter. A gunman or gunmen killing or attempting to kill people in a confined, populated area.
You gotta get some sleep. You're looking like a vampire. No sleep. You ain't got no babies at home keeping you up. What the hell? Then we get
We tried, I'm sorry. We're gonna have to let you go.
Active shooter killings are a tragic, unpredictable reality, and one that's becoming more common.
even though the number of active shooter events has been increasing, your odds of being involved in one are still very slim. But just like fire drills and earthquake preparedness, making a plan in advance can make all the difference. If you do find yourself in the middle of a senseless attack, the why doesn't matter.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, something's happening.
What matters is surviving.
On average, 20 mass shootings take place in the U.S. every year.
Killers usually choose their victims at random. They look for easy targets. So the harder you are to see or to hit, the safer you are. When an attack starts, if you can find a way out of the location, do so.
Get out.
If you stay calm and think clearly, even in the middle of a life and death event, you improve your chances of making it out. Visualize your movements in advance.
Stay behind me. Stay here.
Use cover, something that will stop a bullet, and concealment, something that at least keeps you out of sight.
Attention Suffolk units, code 3 response needed regarding a 245 USV 417. Entering town center shopping mall. Suspects wearing a face mask, possible body armor.
Use any available means to get out, including emergency exits or windows. Most restaurants and retail locations will also have exits in the back, through kitchens or stock rooms. Even in the best cases, police are minutes, not seconds away. You must take action to protect yourself.
Okay, everybody stay calm. It's probably just a drill. No, go back, go back. Oh my God, oh my God,
If you can help others without putting yourself in unnecessary danger, do so.
What's your name?
Lori.
It's going to be okay.
If you can't move safely to an exit, get to a room or a confined area you can lock down. Then secure the location.
Secure your location.
Oh my God.
There's somebody shooting. Everybody stay calm. Remember how we train. Everybody get in this corner, away from the windows. Get the emergency bag from my desk. Help her.
Drywall won't stop a bullet, but there are steps to take to stay safe. Lock or barricade the doors, turn off the lights, move away from any windows, and silence your cell phone.
The other door doesn't lock. Move desks or anything, just block it.
A modern emergency bag can include a first aid kit, gloves, emergency plans for the building, and casualty cards to alert first responders to any wounded victims.
Most active shooter situations are over in 10 to 15 minutes.
Attention Lakeville units, code 3 is needed. We're at 245 GSB 417. It's going to be at Alexandria College. Multiple victims down.
Law enforcement's first responsibility when entering an active shooter situation is to stop the suspect, not to render aid to the victims. Medical teams will enter the scene as soon as the suspect is no longer a threat or is confirmed in another location. Silence any cell phones and remain quiet. Do not alert the shooter to your presence. cannot escape the location and you can't shelter in place, you may have to defend yourself as a last resort. Almost anything can be turned into an improvised weapon. Look for something that can disrupt the shooter's ability to see, breathe, or control their weapon. When law enforcement arrives, they are going to be in a heightened state of readiness and awareness, looking for any aggressive movements. So keep your hands visible and follow any commands you are given. Especially in developing situations, engaging law enforcement, running toward them, reaching for them, even to thank them, could put people at risk.
Surviving an active shooter. For more information,
Thank you.
visit activeshooter.lasd.org.
This really kind of puts a lot of things together, what we talked about. But in by all means, in your free time, get online. There are hundreds and hundreds of these kind of videos out there, but this is one of the better ones that's out there. It kind of puts a lot of things together for you. Any questions when it comes to anything that someone did or could have done in those particular videos, or in the scenario videos that they had there? You just kind of look. Yeah, obviously you see the flight. People that are running and hiding. You saw those that decided to now barricade themselves in place, and obviously those that fought back. The guy with the fire extinguisher. I mean, you're only limited by your imagination what you could use, to defend yourself. And then you kind of see some of the response from law enforcement. We don't know when we're going into a lot of these situations. You're not going to run across, at times, you're not going to run across somebody that just outwardly has, body armor on and is dressed in military clothing and things like that looks, they could be dressed like other coworkers, in a factory environment and things like that. So we're going to go in with a lot of unknowns on our part, so we're not trying to sit back and say, I just not be offended, if you get yelled at and told to get down on the ground, put your face down, put your hands where I can see them, because we don't know in situations like that. So just keep that in mind, that sometimes the response is going to be differently. I tend to not be a yeller when I go into the situations, but I've been around a lot of cops that are screaming at, you have to realize they're very amped up. It's hard to understand sometimes when they're giving these commands, when they're screaming at you, and you have to realize you're in a very traumatic situation too. So I get why they may be yelling, because you're probably not processing. I find I tend to not be a yeller and calm, because it calms people down when I'm calm. So that's just something, and I don't know if I'm unique that way. I think I know several guys that are like that, but that's just something to kind of keep in mind. When we get into school situations, there is a iloveyouguys.org. You're starting to see the school systems going to this, and they also have programs in place that are geared toward not just school environments. Some are for businesses and other things. It's just another website or another thing to look at. you're gonna start seeing some more standardized things take place, especially in the school systems. And the reason we'll kind of point this out is, there's a lot of you have kids or grandkids that are in schools, and we were talking about earlier, it's just a matter of time before some sporting event's gonna get hit. And we wanna try and get to the point where we we are working with the Department of Education to try and get some more standardized things from, say all the way across the state, and not only that, across state lines and areas, so that the protocol is the same for everyone. Because let's face it, if I go into, or you go into a school event, it may not just be here in Benkelman. You could be going to a school event in Indianola. And it's important that your kids know that the protocols for a lockdown situation are the same no matter where they go, so there's no confusion when it comes to that. And that makes sense. And it should be the same way in Kansas, because you guys probably go down and play, have sporting events in Kansas, or one-act play, or whatever the case may be. You're going to be going to these events, so it's important to have some continuity. And that's what this iloveyouguys.org is starting to get involved in some of these, the training of personnel and students and faculty and stuff. Enough of that. Just remember that you have to sometimes have a survivor's mindset. I read occasionally. I'm not a guy that'll sit down and read a book a month or a book. Every now and then it's something to look interesting. There's a book out there called Sheep No More. The guy is he's retired FBI. Has spent some time in the military as well. And what he has gotten into and put out, just it's in paperback, and sometimes it's a fairly easy read. But he's gotten into talking about thinking sometimes like a bad guy. I'm not trying to say that because I want you guys to go out and go into lives of crime, but you have to sometimes think about and a lot of you already do it. If you go to a large metropolitan area, you're going to probably avoid your dark alleys. You're going to go to well-lit places and things like that, because what have we been taught in the past? What's going to happen if you walk down that dark alley? Somebody's going to jump out, and steal your wallet, steal your purse, whatever the case is, or do you harm. It's important to think about your facilities, whether it's the hospital, or if you're at a school, or if you're at the mall, to be able to think about, where are people that are most vulnerable. So, and think, okay, if I were a bad guy and I wanted to do a lot of harm in a particular area, a particular business or whatever the case is, where am I going to hit that particular business? So that's why I've said, I talked to you earlier the other day, you know your facilities better than I do. And you can kind of think sometimes, okay, if I wanted to do harm, or I wanted to get into this building without coming in the front door, how could I get into this building? Sometimes that's what I liked about that book. It just got you kind of thinking a little bit outside the box. And I'm not trying to sit back and say just be paranoid wherever you go, but sometimes you just got to kind of mental rehearse.
Do you think that, standardizing responses is a protocol is a good thing, but doesn't that in a way assist the bad guy because, they're gonna...
It does. It absolutely does, and we talked about that. Do you open this kind of training up just to the general public? Well, yeah, I think you don't want to deny anybody this kind of program, but you're absolutely right. They already do it. Your bad guys already know, for the most part, what your responses are going to be, but what they don't know is what your mindset is. They don't know that they're used to going into these gun-free zones and meeting no resistance. But they're thinking that our mentality is going to just be sit there and take it. What we're trying to now put out there, I don't care if they know it or not, is that, people are going to start fighting for their lives. And I may have intent of killing everyone in the building, but now people are going to fight back, and it's, the numbers or the statistics and the fatalities are going to start coming down. I can't sit back and color this with rainbow stripes and say, hey, you know, because you've taken this program, you know, everything's gonna be okay. You just have to, you know, and that these instances are gonna go away. I think these particular active killer events are here to stay. And it's just now, you know, if you get struck by lightning someday and happen to be in a facility that actually has something like this, we're going to try to just instill the mindset of, you know, fight for your lives. Try to end this and not just sit back and with a false sense of security and think that law enforcement or somebody is going to be there to take care of you. We're going to be there, but it's not going to be immediately, or we can't be everywhere all the time. So I don't know. I kind of beat around the bush a little bit, but.
Have you noticed where the carry laws are where they are now? Has that impacted any?
I don't know that it's impacted. You'll probably, if you know where to find it, and you will find that there are instances where carry concealed, if that's what you're getting at, carry concealed permit holders are thwarting, you know, crime. I haven't heard of a lot. There was a church setting in, I want to say Denver, a few years back, where there was an off-duty police officer that was part of their security detail that was armed, that actually ended up shooting and killing someone that would have probably killed a great number of people. You know, you don't hear about that a lot. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say there's not an agenda when it comes to the media at times. There's a lot of anti-gun stories that are out there, but you don't hear a lot of pro-gun stories out there. And I'm not trying to sway anybody politically at all. And if you're a carry concealed permit holder, and you know, if anybody in here is, I don't, you know, that's your choice. And obviously your facility is going to have policies that dictate whether you can or can't. You know, there's obviously places that are dictated by law that are gun-free zones. You know, that's a whole nother, you know, 2-hour debate or class, you know, when it comes to that. But I can tell you, you know, it helps. It's a deterrent, I think, for bad guys if they know that they can meet the potential resistance of a gun. So I mean, that's just something to keep in mind.
One of the things I've been thinking about, you know, in healthcare settings and schools or whatever, you know, where there's a lot of people in a area or a room, do you ever think that we'll see, I mean, you have fire suppression, do you think we'll ever have like smoke? They're gonna move on.
Are you talking about like in a prison setting where they release like CS gas through the exhaust and
No,
something like that too?
just smoke, so they can't see.
It would provide some.
Like you would have a deal when you lock down your classroom, boom, smokes the room.
I mean, that's, you know, I don't think that we will see that on a large scale, like it's mandated statewide. You would never see anything like that. But you know, when it comes to a particular school district, you know, that would be something that, I mean, it provides concealment. You know, I guess when it comes down to it. So, I wouldn't see that as being something that you're going to see widespread anytime soon. But hey, like I talked about earlier, you know, with the door closures and things like that, you know, the more of these tragedies that take place, there's going to be all kinds of entrepreneurs out there that are going to now try and do what they can to help, you know, either to make a buck or to help. I mean, you know, when it comes to providing concealment, that's definitely
I was reading an article, I can't remember where it was from now, but the local fire department was taking their old fire hose and cutting it up into chunks, you know, 12 inches long or so. And then when you close your door and you got your door closer up there, you slide it over and then you can't open it.
Yeah, there's some, I mean.
And they were handing those out to schools.
You're only limited by your imagination. You have to also realize that when, you know, you're denying access to good guys at times too, so you have to be prepared, you know, when an all clear is given, you know, and those are some of the things when you start getting into your training and your drills and things like that to know, okay, we have to be able to remove it too. But yeah, I mean, it can be very, very inexpensive or free when it comes to denying access when you have those type of door closures and stuff. What you do matters, you know, whether whether it's avoid and run, deny, hide, or defend and fight. People will throw all kinds of things out there, and I will just say that's an option. You know, I don't care what it is, it's an option. And I'm not trying to minimize anything, whether it's using a chunk of fire hose or whether it's putting up smoke screens and things like that. That's an option. I mean, you're doing something. The other option that you would have is to sit there and take it. And I would rather do something. This should be kind of a little brief one, what you do, and it goes back to that school board meeting. And we talked a little bit about this. What happens in police arrive. A lot of chaos and a lot of people yelling different things, whether it's from law enforcement or people trying to respond to them. Everybody's amped up in situations like that, and like I told you, don't be offended, by law enforcement's response, because you just have to realize we're amped up in these situations too. So we're not trying to, be mean or anything like that. We just want to go home at the end of the day too. So. That's our priority, is to stop the killing, stop the dying, and evacuate the area. When we go into situations like that, our training is we go to where the threat is. Whether somebody points it to us or we see the active killer or we hear gunshots, that's where we're going. And we know, we're full aware that we're going to be meeting people coming 100 miles an hour back at us, and it's very confusing. Some of our training is very difficult training. When it comes to that, because it is a chaotic situation, as you can imagine how it would be. But you just know that we are going to go and we'll use any help that we can get. If somebody says he's down the hall and to the right, we will use that information and at least send somebody or two of us to that particular area. We're going to go to where the threat is. When we arrive, follow the commands, show the palms, and don't move. Unless you're directed otherwise. If we say, get out of the building and go, go to the bus barn if we're in a school situation, or go out of the building and stand by and give the parking lot. If we tell you to do something, just follow the commands that we tell you to do. Most of the time, we're gonna want to see open palms. We might even have another slide here. Even if you're a carry concealed permit holder and you're in a mall or you're at a Walmart or whatever the case is, by all means, holster your weapon, put it away, and keep your palms where we can see it. We will decipher, at a later time. Once law enforcement arrives, as a carry concealed permit holder, your responsibilities are at that point to not necessarily go after a bad guy or join up with us to clear rooms and things like that. So. You have until law enforcement arrives to act if you so choose. You're not obligated, being a carry concealed permit holder, to do anything at all. But I would like to think that if you've gone through the effort to be a carry concealed permit holder or weapon holder, you had that mindset of that you want to be a protector of sorts, whether it's for your own person or for someone else. This is where you guys know more than I do, when it comes to medical assistance. If something would happen at the school, I'm sure you guys would be involved immediately, because you'd probably be put in a holding pattern until everything is clear. And then you can only imagine there's probably, triage situations, and or you would stay put where you're at the hospital and just wait for an influx of people and probably get other local hospitals or, whether it's medevac or whatever the case is, you would have them people in or out as well. This situation would you guys would have the first aid kits, you would have all the equipment in place at the hospital if something would happen. I would definitely wouldn't say feel comfortable, but I would be glad that if it were to happen and you had mass casualties, it would be in your facility because you would have everything there to deal with it immediately. So. Again, like I said before, you know, so just there are entrepreneurs out there that are selling all kinds of stuff now because of the mass casualty events, and I don't blame them. You know, this is kind of nice if there are places, business schools that would actually have trauma kits in place that they could even seal up in a 5-gallon bucket. I think I know that when I worked in the Kearney area, the emergency room, the personnel there would actually give all law enforcement a go bag that we would have, you know, large bandages and tourniquets and things like that, you know, that when we would respond, you know, in a rural situation, that we would have something that we could carry in with us, and we're trained to actually carry it in with us. So. Expect mental trauma. PTSD is a real thing. It isn't just for you know, military and law enforcement. You know, it's a traumatic event. You know, I'm sure you have things in place. You know, that you would have some debriefing, some critical stress debriefing, and things like that in place. But I can tell you personally, just use those things that are available to you when it comes to dealing with stress. And I know you guys probably have, like, you know, like most places, a workplace violence and harassment policy. You know, sometimes, I don't know how often, but you probably revisit it, you know, annually at the very least, and know that, you know, you should just kind of respond, you know, to people that you have in place, whether it's supervisors, if you start seeing things out of the normal when it comes to behavior of some folks. It's easy to just sweep things under the rug and put your head in the sand over some of these kind of things, but, you know, mental health issues are a real problem, and you know, it's important to, at the very least, pass the information on or talk to someone about it. You know, just things that you maybe noticed that maybe somebody else didn't pick up on. These are just some of the indicators. Whether it's attendance problems, decreased productivity, unexplained or unacceptable, uncharacteristic emotional outbursts. Basically, when it gets down to it, it's, you know, just keep your ears open, keep your eyes open to, you know, to anything that's just not right or it's out of the ordinary. And you have the power to report. All right, this is kind of what we've gone over. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I needed to touch on a little bit more when it comes to this PowerPoint. And I guess when it comes down to it, I guess I'll put it out there. You guys have any questions of me other than can you get out of here right away?
So from the hospital standpoint, I mean, the main takeaway I'm getting from this is get yourself out as quickly as you can. If you can't get out, fight at the last resort.
And my response is that's an option. I'm not going to tell you what you should do if that's what you're comfortable doing. If you can, you know, not everybody is as fleet of foot. I know I can't move like I used to. And my training is differently, or my level of experience is different than, you know, yours. You know, it's that's definitely, I think, probably what you're going to see most people do. And if that's what you guys want to do as a, you know, train to do and as a priority, then by all means, you know, find an exit and eliminate yourself from the situation. Be prepared that there are situations to where there may be multiple shooters or multiple killers, and they may be planning, if they know that you plan to 100% of the time evacuate, somebody could be sitting outside of an exit and just start picking people off as they leave the building. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's something you have to realize that sometimes they plan on those contingencies. So that's why we want to throw out there several things, because it might not work to do that. You know, so that's why, you know, there are times it may be a better option for you if you're, you know, if I can't get to an exit, you have to have that plan to, you know, protect yourself in place or deny access to a room. So be flexible with it, but you're gonna see most people doing exactly what you said, probably running, getting themselves as far away from the situation as they can. You know, find out how fast a sprinter you are at times. I mean, you may not realize how, you know, you may not feel like you can move right now, but I guarantee you when shots are fired, you're gonna be able to. So, again, that's an option.
My question is for administration, where those that hold a professional license, if there are patients in the hospital and you have somebody come in who's actively seeking to shoot people, what's the ramifications there?
What do you do with your patient?
Yeah,
That's abandoned.
it's business office, are they allowed to run away and leave? But nurses, do they have to stay in
that
sacrifice?
question, I would think they would try to save the patient.
I don't think so, but, because I was thinking, if you can't, like.
Are you required to
what
sacrifice
choices
yourself for
you do.
patients if there's an active shooter?
No, you still take care of yourself first.
With an ICU patient during a tornado. At my old job, I had to stay with a patient on a ventilator upstairs when everyone else was in the basement for a tornado warning because that was my patient.
There are definitely some things to discuss and think about because, you know, yeah, I mean, it's, again, you could get struck by lightning tomorrow and you know, but I'm just saying, in maybe situations like that, you have to look at the potential, and again, I don't do site evaluations or anything like that. Is there a way to now shelter in place or secure in place, or at the very least, try to deny access, you know, to that patient's room or something like that? I don't know. You know, what would be even feasible to do without spending millions of dollars? You know, you can fortify a place all you want, but you know, at what cost? You know, now are we going to have to start laying off people because we're going to ramp up how much we're putting into securing our facilities, or is it worth it? You know, I don't know. You know, those are just, it absolutely, and that's part of what we hope to accomplish somewhat with this program is maybe start the discussion on some things. You know, it's easy to kick the can, you know, and not think about it, but that's absolutely a valid point. What are you obligated to do?
So to me, you're gonna have more patients afterwards, so you would want to save yourself, so you could be more help.
Right.
Yeah, every person's
It's-
gonna be different, you can put a policy in place, but that's not to say nurse
Right.
A from nurse B is actually gonna say
In a-
what the policy says.
There are going to be a lot of gray areas, you know, like you pointed out. I mean, it's not what's good for, you know.
And this is a real crappy way to say it. I mean, if you have people that are able to get out, that you can just grab and go, but you're not gonna stay there with somebody that's, comfort cares. I mean,
I don't think that's crappy. It's just realistic. I usually wish the children never left.
So is there anything out there that
Fire, I mean,
does
if you
site
can rescue,
evaluations
you do, but you're not,
I'm
you
sure that
can't.
we as an agency don't get into that. There's a lot of private individuals, whether they're, you know, retired law enforcement. In fact, I know there are, but I don't have a business card or a, you know, particular business I can steer you to. I would just say a quick Google search would probably find you hundreds of them.
see, I'm sitting here thinking about like locking our fire doors. And do you see like maybe some of those regulations changing on how some of those things are set up?
Oh, yeah, there could
Because it would be really easy to close
there'll be
off a lot
constant
of the
changes.
hospital.
Yeah. And you could probably, I'm sure there are a lot of different policies and site evaluations that have been done, especially for some of your larger hospitals. And, you know, it probably costs a lot of money to have those done. But hey, the world's a small place. You know, you can probably put some feelers out there, talk to people that we know that maybe work in some of these larger facilities and tailor something that works for you, you know. And at the very least, you know, it opens up some discussions. You're only limited by your imagination when it comes to securing your facility. There are cheap options like a piece of fire hose, or you can get into now installing, you know, a centrally command, you know, lockdown situation like your prisons do. They can immediately lock down doors. You know, that's probably not very feasible in some of your rural areas. It's really, I mean, you're talking about huge money.
None of our brackets.
It could be very simple. It could be a couple of brackets and a 2x4.
Well, I know our facility has a lot of
Well,
blind spots that can
And like
easily be.
the problem with a lot of that, you know, is the fact that you see at a lot of places like bars and stuff, when they're trying to keep people out of getting in a back door or something, they put brackets on the door and then they put a bar. But you can't do that on a fire door, because if you put one screw in that fire door, then your fire rating on that door is gone.
You're absolutely right.
What about those things in the floor that you drill a hole in the floor and you just put those that are up against the door?
If the door didn't come with it, you can't add them to it.
It doesn't, it's not to, you add it to the floor. And it's not there all the time, it's something that you have to physically pick up, slide it in the floor, and then it would block the door from moving whichever way. They make them for motels too.
Yeah.
Your doors go like this, right?
Yeah.
So each door goes,
Do we work on one side?
one way, one goes the other way.
Yeah. There's a lot of unique problems when it comes to facilities, and you know, especially when we start getting into different wings that are very outdated and things like that. But I guess what I like the discussion. You know, I love this kind of stuff. But what works for one place isn't necessarily going to work for your place. And mainly, what we want to get into the mindset part of it. When it comes to facilities, there are a lot of different things out there, a lot of forums online and things like that you can really look into. And you guys are throwing out some really good ideas. Just think outside the box. What could I do for a little bit of nothing that would deny someone access to a particular room?
So our fire doors are rated to withstand a fire for 2 hours or whatever. I mean, what's gonna shoot through a fire?
22.
Yeah.
Everything I own.
Everything you shoot through, yeah?
Pretty much, yeah.
The 22 goes low.
What about the 22?
I shoot a 223 a lot, which is not a very big rifle, and I shoot through 1-inch plate steel, and I shoot pretty good.
That's what I do. I mean, locking the doors is a good deterrent, but if somebody wants to get in,
They're
they're
coming
coming in.
in.
Especially the glass doors that back by like X-ray, those doors, they're.
And what you're doing in some of these situations like that is, you know, if you just, even like that one paragraph from the Virginia Tech shooting, even if you just deny them access even for a little while, you know, if they're hell-bent on getting in, they'll find a way to get in, whether they're gonna shoot hinges or locks or things like that, they'll get in. But if they're gonna go on to something that's easier.
The more difficult you make it, the less apt they are to try it.
Yeah.
On the hospital, you can get on the roof and one HVAC system, you take that whole wing.
And I mean, as far as the hospital, on the whole, anywhere, there's so many people coming in and out all day, every day. I mean, the threats there.
Your first line of defense is your receptionist. Yes.
Well, in our community, I just said 95% of the people that walk in our door are armed. Whether it's a pocket knife or whatever it is, that's what people carry.
Rita, I didn't know if this was a thing with your policy, but, I did go to an active shooter class in Lincoln, and some facilities are using code silver. But, there was an argument that they would rather not use code silver. They want everybody in the building to know, cause only staff would know what that meant, but if you announced it, then everybody would know to get out.
That's our policy changed.
Ours is common language.
Yep, that's how we train all new staff, is just to say what it is, because
Yeah, there was
trainings for the last 6 or 7 years have said that.
Well, what they were running into a lot was they had all these codes and then they'd announce it and everybody would like,
It's even worse in stressful situations. Sometimes plain speak is, you're seeing a lot of law enforcement going away from 10 codes to plain speak. Just because of stressful situations, especially when it's not a common 10 code that's put out. Or, you know, a lot of time, I don't know how your communication system is, but if you're not using that particular code a lot or some codes a lot, somebody might have to like refer to a card. But if it's something I haven't heard of before, I wonder if that means, but a lot of times you're gonna hear screaming, you're gonna hear gunshots, or, typically you're going to hear something, unless somebody has come in with a suppressed weapon or something like that, you may not hear it, but.
No, it'd be just like the first video, you're talking so fast, nobody's gonna understand.
Right, and that's gonna happen, and and a lot of people are gonna be calling in, whether it's a radio or a phone, a lot of people are gonna be calling at the same time.
I was kinda happy to see the one guy use the fire extinguisher, cause we have them all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you use it as a weapon or something to disorient them, yeah.
Disorienting and knocking them in.
That's what I was disappointed.
The guy with the mop, though, I mean.
You got that long.
Yeah, on the forklift.
We had an incident
So the lady
at our
left the
school
course,
that we said, Coach, we had a lot of ladies with code, and one of the
Trying to
teachers
hit
thought
the
we were
gun.
just doing a joke, cause we would
Not
do
gonna
a
have her
code.
hand
Cause she'd always say if there's
or
a
hit
hot
the-
guy in the office, do a code, whatever, and we got her, and we had a lot,
Yeah,
because we had a kid threaten the teachers come back,
I
and
would,
was
I
gonna
would
shoot her,
probably
and
try
so
to
we
not
did a
West,
code,
I've probably done
and the
what she
teacher
did.
thought it was a joke, and
She was
comes to
just
the
probably
office,
not
and she thought we were
physically
just
strong
joking
enough.
over the
She did
intercom,
something.
because they had no idea what the codes were. 'Cause
Would she have been as effective hitting that guy on the head with it or on the neck
I'm
or
so
something
glad
like
those
that?
people get away from
I don't know what she had in her purse.
It makes
Probably not.
And that was the first thing when we did our
more
training,
upset.
and have law enforcement come out, but they told us, don't do codes.
Well, a lot of times it deters them, and they know everybody's
Yeah,
on
they
the
would,
lookout for them.
I would go in the case.
Well, the sad part was the
They
teachers didn't know,
that this wasn't-
a lot of
Yeah,
teachers
no, I
didn't
just
know,
smile
so
when
they
I
were
watch
letting
it.
kids back into the school because they didn't know
They
what
never saved-
child
never
was
saved all our
being
lives.
locked down,
You know.
I thought it was very kind of that shooter not to shoot her after she whacked him with his purse.
I know.
That's a risk you run when it doesn't, when you fail, something like that. Now, whether she collapsed to the floor after she attempted that, rather than going in for a second shot with her purse or whatever the case is, I think, that physically that's probably all she was able to do. But I gotta give her credit, for trying.
And that whole thing just looked to me like he wanted himself to get shot.
He announced it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die today.
That makes
Right
you
up there.
wonder if he really intended when he was shooting to hit him or not.
I think he did. I just think he just terrible shot. Like it's the mentality, I'm gonna take as many people as I can with me, and he felt his wife had been wrong, so. And there's that.
Well, and a lot of people want even though they won't be here to see it, they want the notoriety of what they did.
There's that too, and you'll see that in some of their suicide notes. I'm gonna be famous, everybody's gonna know my name, at the end of this.
They're not even most, everybody's doing it.
Well, and then you're also seeing, some media outlets are refusing to put the name, they'll just say it, 22-year-old male.
Yeah, I've noticed in the last couple of years that it kind of has dropped since media has been picked up.
Well, and the news outlets don't cover the unsuccessful attacks like they cover the successful ones.
Right.
I think there's a lot more that happen that nobody ever knows about.
I can tell you that there are a lot more that people don't know about that we try not to share. That a lot of planning has gone into, and luckily somebody, whether it's a student or somebody, has stepped forward and heard about it and turned law enforcement on to it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that does take place that you don't hear about, and for good reason. We don't like to tip our hand, and we don't necessarily want someone that's reported it to now suffer, any repercussions from basically being a snitch, kind of thing, so.
Well, the more you report that, the more they figure out, well, that didn't work, I better come up.
Right,
with
you
better
just
idea.
now educate your bad guy, So, that, next time, or I'm not gonna put it, I'm not gonna write out my manifesto on, on Facebook or something, one of those kind of things, there's some, believe it or not, people still put stuff out on Facebook. But which is good for us. Any other questions? I like the discussion part of it. That makes it easy for me. Like I said, for obvious reasons, I can't get into site assessment because I don't know your facilities as well as you guys know your facilities. And I would just urge you just to have, periodically have a discussion and things that you can, look into, whether you want to budget for them or whether it's stuff that you can get donated or think outside the box. I mean, there's some ways to secure yourselves in place that really don't cost much. But I just want to get into the mentality part of it. If you get a chance to read the book and pass it around, that sheet no more. I think it's Jonathan Gillum is the author of it. It's really a good read to not just when it comes to active killer events, but just to help keep yourself safe and whether you're traveling or whether you're wherever you may be. Just kind of almost get you to think a bit like a bad guy. I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but it kind of gets you into the mindset of why bad guys do what they do sometimes. It's like the impala or the gazelle, how cautiously they approach water holes because, they know that's where they're going to get hunted. So it's just kind of, it gives you that mentality to think. Try not to think like a victim all the time, think like a bad guy sometimes too.
No better criminal than a good cop.
Yeah, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have a badge on. She could probably tell you a story. I was pretty good. I was good at hiding some of the bad stuff.
Or just quiet.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming and doing this.
No problem.
Now, there was quite a bit of interest from the community. How many people do you guys like to do? Is there a number? Or?
I've done it for as much. I did it at the college in Curtis, and there was 80 or 90. The nice part about that is they had really a nice lecture hall, good, with good equipment and stuff. I can just plug my PowerPoint into their system. I'm very limited on what I can do off of this. We can kind of see. If we're going to do that, I don't know if you have a community building that has some pretty good audio, but run that by Joel. Sometimes, if there is interest in the community, advertise it well in advance and get as many people out, to attend as you can. That way, we're not turn around, 3 weeks later and somebody that missed it and have to put it on again because we're really short-staffed. Put it that way. And come February, our area was increased by 4 more counties, so we're going to be really short-staffed. But again, somebody wants to be a trooper. You got a couple of boys that are getting home now.
We're looking
Yeah, and there's always a need for nurses. But somebody's not inclined or smart enough to be a nurse, they can be a cop.